Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast is a Christ-centered podcast. Established in 2019 and hosted weekly by Pastor Chris Busher. Addressing a host of topics such as the Great Commission, Christian discipleship, and often featuring interviews with special guests who are experts in their field. The views and events expressed on this podcast and all related materials belong solely to their author and not necessarily to the author's employer, organization, committee, or other group or individual. While all attempts are made to present accurate information, some information may become outdated over time. Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast makes every attempt to timely update any and all such information. Without further delay, here's another powerful episode of Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast. Once again, my name is Dallas here, joining you from São Paulo, Brazil today. And we have another amazing guest joining us, JC Finnegan. And he is not calling from the US. He's not calling from Brazil. He is calling from Thailand, outside of Bangkok. That's so incredible that he is in Asia, because I have spent time in Thailand as well. You guys are aware of that. And it's so cool that we have other people traveling the world and experiencing what the world has to offer. And so, JC, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? It's a pleasure
I'm
to be
doing
here.
pretty good. It's such a pleasure to have you. I'm really excited about your book today. And just for our audience, so the title is The Divided Stories of America, the Green Forest. And when you think of the divided stories of America, what is this going to bring? And the bio is very, very incredible. Just the first sentence: what if the United States of America were no longer united? Wow.
Yeah.
Hearing that question, just thinking about that, that'll never happen. I hope this never happens. I hope I never see it. But you went in and you wrote a book about it, what it would be like. And so we're going to get all into that. But before I give you the chance, please tell our audience who you are, a little bit about your Christian testimony, and for my information, why are you in Asia? I'm curious.
Yeah. All right. So my name is JC, and I'm a man. I'm a normal man. I'm a sinner. I'm a flawed human being that's moving along on this journey like we all are. I'm trying to learn each and every day. So I grew up in the United States of America in Ohio. Growing up, I went to church with my family, went to Catholic schools, and faith was a part of my life growing up. And then as I got a little bit older, I went to university. Worked for a while in the United States, eventually found my way over to Asia, where I've been working as an English teacher. And in the past couple years, I went back to something that I had done at college, which was creative writing. I just had this bug inside of me where I had these ideas bouncing around in my head, and I got on the computer and started putting them down, and they just began to flow.
That's incredible. So in Asia, you are an English teacher.
Yes.
When I was in Asia, I was teaching English as well. So amazing.
And how did you like that?
Cool. It was a challenge at first, because that's my first experience of teaching English. I was just learning how to teach English there. But we were typically teaching English in villages. And so we would go village to village in Thailand and Cambodia and help the children. And so we were working primarily with children, big groups of children. And so that was really cool and a great experience. But now I'm teaching English in Brazil, more toward the business side here in Brazil, focusing on business.
Yeah, so you're teaching adults?
Yep. And my wife is also an English teacher. That's a story for another day, but she also teaches business, adults, children. And so we offer a variety there.
Yeah.
A little bit back to your question of creative writing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so I've always enjoyed stories. I've always enjoyed writing, whether it was movies. Even when I was younger, there was some television. I know some of the material on TV isn't always the best, but books. And then When I was at college, I remember taking a creative writing class, and I was inspired by that. I think I had some ideas in my head, and I dabbled with some short stories back then, and even some poetry. And then over time, I kind of put that on the back burner and focused more on some practical matters. I did opt to go to law school in the United States, which you get into some writing with that, but it's not really creative writing. It's a different style. Get into that, the legalese, if you will, right? Some of that dry writing. And so I did that for a while. And then obviously with teaching English, writing is kind of always there. I've been able to do some fun things with the students where we've written some creative things for them, whether it was plays or, helping the kids out with some of their stories. Just this past year, we did some Halloween videos, which were really fun. We wrote some scripts for the kids, and then they were able to act it out, and we recorded that. Fun stuff.
You're listening to the Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast. We'll be right back after this quick word from our sponsors.
God knows more than all of us. In fact, you probably want to know more about what He truly knows. Thankfully, He wrote a bunch of it down in the Bible. Hungry for Wisdom podcast is an all-you-can-eat buffet of God's guidance to live skillfully in this world. Jesus deserves disciples. Listen to the podcast by searching Hungry for Wisdom on your favorite podcast app today. The Bible is the ultimate success book. It is filled with stories, anecdotes, inspiration, insights, and powerful specific instructions on how to live a life that is full, meaningful, significant, and successful. During the 17 Biblical Principles of Success Virtual Summit, you will hear from 17 remarkable individuals who will share their personal stories, experiences, and insights as it pertains to each of their principles. Find more information at youareagift.foundation/virtual-summit. Purchase your 100% tax-deductible ticket for $17. All proceeds will benefit the You Are a Gift Foundation. And going from your creative writing and the book that we have today, available for purchase on Amazon, is this the first book that you're releasing as an author?
Yes.
Yeah? Is it the first of many? Or after this experience, you're like, maybe I'm done? What do you think?
Oh, great question. So there are going to be 4 books in this series. So I already have the groundwork for the other 3. So in this series, the United States is divided into 4 sections. So this first part is the Northeast section of the United States. And then I've already written, like I said, the basic part, the groundwork for the other 3 sections. There's a Southeast region, a frontier region, and a Pacific region. So I'm looking forward to those. Each of the 3 regions has a slightly different style. And the way this developed is when people talk about a national separation in the United States, there are practical issues with that. So my book, of course, is fiction. It's not a legislative book or a dry political book. It is fiction. But some of the issues surrounding, let's say, a national separation include the United States not being divided by ideology, by geography. So you can't just cut the country in half on a latitudinal line or a longitudinal line. And so by dividing it into 4 regions, I tried to work around some of that. So I carved out this northeast area, which in terms of ideology is very similar to the Pacific region. And so people that are familiar with the United States, they might understand that New York and California have some things in common. While a place like Florida might have some things in common with Wyoming or maybe Tennessee or a state that's in a slightly different area.
And it's hard to imagine if let's say that they do break apart in this factor, it would be hard for California and New York to join forces because they're so far, to put their resources together, it would be more difficult.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't get too much into there's an old saying that making laws is like making sausage, that people don't want to see it. So in an original draft of the book, I had a prologue which chronicled some of the process. So how would this happen? Would it have to go through Congress? Would there be a constitutional amendment? So I don't get into a lot of the particulars, but in the book, I've alluded to the fact that the New York region and California, that there's a puppet regime, essentially in the Northeast, and they both fall under the same authority, if you will.
Yeah. Whenever people think about this, the United States, not having unity anymore, we will no longer have, the United States the way as it is. I mean, first off, you're thinking, oh, I hope this never happens. I hope I never see this happen. But then on the other side, it's not that far to believe. Like for me, as a person who has grew up in the US as well and has been removed for several years, it's not that hard to think, this could happen. And so I'm really interested to hear your thoughts and tell us a little bit more about this book, just because it's so interesting for me personally.
Right. I think in terms of people not wanting it, what would be most important is that there wasn't any sort of war or conflict. So I think that's something that most people could agree they would never want to see. So, going all the way back, we had the Civil War, and we would never want to see something like that. Now, if there was some sort of amicable separation, again, what I've written is a fiction book. But if something like that were to happen, theoretically, I can envision a scenario where it could be beneficial for all parties involved. If instead of people getting bogged down with their differences and arguing about things and kind of spinning their wheels in the mud, if people wanted to take things in a different direction and there was some sort of separation, and then that area could focus on moving things forward in a certain direction, and like-minded people accomplishing things and building and growing, instead of, again, getting bogged down with the same arguments day in and day out that seemingly never get resolved. Yeah.
When you put it from that perspective, it's like a positive,
Yeah.
And when you think about division, usually it's always negative. Division is negative, always. But when you put it like this, it sounds, this maybe not such a negative thing. Maybe there are benefits. So take us a little bit deeper into the book. It says that they have an authority figure in the book who uses AI technology to control the masses. Tell us about this.
Right. So the main character has nicknamed the ruling class the reptilians. And there's a central bank digital currency. And the way that fits into the book is the ruling class is able to give the people something that seems beneficial, but ultimately it's used as a tool of control. So they're able to monitor everybody's spending habits, and if somebody isn't following the rules, they can limit their spending and freeze their accounts. So that's part of the plot. There are some characters that aren't able to use any of their money, and everybody has a social credit score, which again functions as a form of control. So there's strict monitoring of what the citizens do and what they say and what they're permitted to say and what they're not permitted to say.
What type of punishment do you see in the book when someone doesn't obey? Like, yes, the freezing of the accounts, monitoring the spending and whatnot. What else do you see?
When people don't obey, basically they get ostracized from society. So a lot of the characters, their social credit score plummets to zero. They're not able to use the funds that they have. So I have a number of characters that are living in the streets and really struggling. So the main character, he meets an old high school teacher that he had. So this is his old history teacher from high school. And his history teacher is one of these guys that's just been ostracized from society.
And how does the rest of the world react to this? Do you get into that in your book, or that's not something that you discuss?
Yeah, good question. I don't get into that too much. In the book, the plot is mostly focused in the United States. So the character, he does travel to the Pacific region, San Francisco at one point, but I don't get too much into the international community.
Mm-hmm. Because the US, from many standpoints, is like a flagship for the world.
Oh, yeah.
And so if there's some division happening in the US, I can't imagine what the other countries would react or think about
and
this.
That's when you get into some of the practical problems with this and why a lot of people in the United States would not want it, because our currency is basically the reserve currency of the world. We have a strong standing army. Obviously, the United States has been a powerful empire, if you will, for a long time. And a separation and national divorce could weaken their international prestige.
And you said, you used those words, the national divorce. It's a crazy thing to say, but it's the perfect way to describe, the breaking apart of unity. Yeah. Has your time overseas encouraged you in the writing of this book?
Good question. I would say that I do have one character in the book who is from Thailand. So in the book, the main character has already been in Thailand, and he's in the United States now with his Thai girlfriend. So people and cultures, so more things that I could bring to the table when I'm writing.
And growing up in Ohio, did you grow up in a big city, a small city?
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs. So outside of Cleveland, Ohio.
For myself, I grew up in a city of 800 people in the US, in Missouri, a small town. And then going to Asia and going to Sao Paulo, which is one of the biggest cities in the world, 13 million people. It just really expanded my mind. And and how big the world is, because the world is huge and there's so much to offer. And yeah, I think you're exactly right. Some of your time in Thailand helped you write a portion of your book. I can't imagine that it wouldn't, your time overseas wouldn't inspire you as you write, because there's just the cultures are amazing, the different cultures.
Yeah. Language features heavily in the plot of the story. For example, one of the characters speaks Thai language, and I have a Spanish-speaking character. And in addition to that, the characters have developed a coded language that enables them to fly under the radar and not incur penalties for violating some of the speech regulations.
Yeah, code language would make sense, to be able to go under the radar, because when you have these different sanctions, we could call it, I guess.
Yeah.
It would be common that there would be rebellious people who would want to work under the radar and not join into what is happening. So that makes total sense to me too. For our audience today and for your readers, what could be some of the life lessons that we could take from this book?
Okay. There are classic themes in the book. So when I started the book, it was my goal from the very beginning to write something that was based in a lot of the old stories, the tradition. So good versus evil, themes of duty, meaning, sacrifice, truth, love, not succumbing to fear. These are all some of the lessons in the book. And I think if people were to read it, perhaps they'll be able to relate to the main character. He's certainly not perfect. And I would hope that people could see an evolution in the character throughout the book. So where he starts, and then some of the lessons that he learns throughout the book, and hopefully some people can relate to that, and they can see a development.
And how about biblical principles? Anything that you wrote your faith into this book at all, or something that we could use in our faith journey as well?
Yeah, believe it or not, when I started with this idea, I had this notion of 4 regions. And then shortly after that, I started putting together some characters, and I thought, okay, for the first book, this book, The Northeast, there'll be an Adam and Eve theme. And then in the second region, I was thinking that will be the Cain and Abel themed book. Because the first book has the main character, Finn, and his girlfriend. And then the second story is about 2 brothers. And then the third book I planned as a sort of Sodom and Gomorrah. And then I had a 4th book, and I was thinking about different ways that I could do that. It could be an Exodus theme, Jonah in the whale theme, or even like a Jesus Christ story theme.
That's really interesting to take those different stories and match it into what's going on.
Right. So they don't match on perfectly. Like, obviously I'm not copying those stories, or even in terms of the exact theme. They're not exact, but just as kind of a very loose template. And then also in terms of biblical themes, I had thought about the Tower of Babel. And in the first book, since there's this sort of communist government that's essentially trying to build utopia on Earth. So this is a society that has excluded God in favor of the AI technology and the science.
And that's not so hard to believe either, that something like this could happen. So
Right.
I really like that you wrote on the lines of a story like this, the United States dividing. And it is something that we could all, it could happen. And so some fiction books are so fiction that it's hard to imagine what's going on and to stay connected. But yours is so close that I feel like we could all really relate to this and all see it in our own way as you're writing. And so I think that's really intriguing on your book.
Yeah, there are so many different aspects to the book that I believe there's something that everyone can relate to, or something that everyone will be able to see, like, oh yeah, I can see that sort of thing happening, whether it's the central bank digital currency, whether it's language monitoring, whether it's a UBI, a universal basic income, some of the inherent dangers with artificial intelligence and surveillance, and where we are with a lot of that. I think people will be able to understand that.
Yeah. And another question for you here. How would this book be relevant to our listeners today? And what would be your message for them to purchase the book?
I think there's immense value in stories. So if people read the Bible, of course, we know that Jesus taught in parables. We know that the Bible includes a lot of stories. And I think there can be tremendous value in good stories. So in these classic themes of good versus evil, truth versus lies, fear versus bravery, and standing up for what's right, that there's value in that, and people can gain a lot from reading stories like that. They're kind of just a reminder for all of us about how important these virtues are. And so often they're very difficult to do. It's tough a lot of times to do the right thing. It's a lot easier to do what maybe in our hearts we know is not the right thing. So I think that there's that sort of message in the book, and I think that people can enjoy that and get some value out of that.
Yeah. And the timeline on the release of the next book. So this book, one more time, it is available on Amazon, The Divided Stories of America, The Green Forest. And when do you think would be the release of the second, third, and fourth book in this series?
It's a great question. I can't say for certain, but maybe for the second book, I've already written a decent amount of it. So I'd say several months from now, maybe 6 months, being realistic.
Okay. So purchase the first book, read it 4 times, and then you'll be ready for book 2, and the series will continue for you. So
yeah.
Another question here.
Yeah, book 2 is not in the communist territory anymore. So if people are craving something where the guy's not oppressed by an authoritarian government, in book 2, we'll get a reprieve.
Yeah. Incredible. Well, I'm really interested in this book. Thank you so much for all the things that you shared today for our audience. And if you could leave us with one overall thought today, what do you think that would be?
Oh, wow. Truth and love. I think that's the ultimate message of the book. in a lot of ways, it's just a love story. So for all of us, every day, choose truth, choose love.
Yeah. And where can our audience find you personally? Do you have any social media out there, Facebook, Instagram, that we can keep updated on with you?
Yeah, so my author's website is jcfinnegan.com, and that's probably the best place to find me. And I'm going to try to keep that page up to date with some information about this first book, and then book 2, book 3, book 4.
All right. So audience, please check out that link below to the author website, and also the link to buy this book on Amazon. They're both there available for you. And thank you again for sharing everything that you did today. If I can have you end our time with a prayer, I would really appreciate it.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And deliver us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen.
You've just listened to the Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast with your host, Pastor Chris Busher. Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast was recorded live in studio with final editing made before uploading. Subscribe today to Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast on iTunes or Google Play. For more fantastic daily content, visit Pastor Chris Busher online via Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't miss the next episode on Faith and Family Fellowship Podcast.